Good evening, class. Can you hear me?
Good evening, teacher.
Yes, good evening, lecturer.
All right. Right. Let's start our today lecture. Right. Today is already week 11. We have already discussed econometric for 10 weeks. And during this last 10 weeks, we only focus on cross-sectional data, which both dependent and independent variables are continuous or numerical. We have not so far discussed qualitative or categorical variable yet. Right? Today, we're gonna have a look on add multiple regression analysis with qualitative information. But before we move on, allow me to briefly recap what you studied so far. Good. We spent the last 4 or 5 weeks looking only at multiple linear regressions. You learn that if assumption 1 to 4 of MLR, MRL, multiple linear regressions are met, you obtain unbiased coefficients. However, practically, zero conditional mean assumptions, endogeneity, omitted variable bias is rarely met. But if assumption 1 to 4, you obtain unbiased coefficient. If assumption 1 to 5, including homoscedasticity, are met, you obtain correct variant, you obtain correct or unbiased standard error. So that you can make an inference by computing correcting t star 6 and p value. Right? So far, it's just only this statement. But what we discussed so far is that how can we make sure that zero conditional mean assumptions is met? So you need to do a lot of reading to know what are the independent variables of interest that might correlate it with error terms should be included in your model. Right? We also discussed some other issues, such as multicollinearity. Next week, we have a look specifically for heteroscedasticity, how we are going to address that issue, the assumption number 5. But for multicollinearity, it sounds confused between multicollinearity and heteroscedasticity. But multicollinearity is the high correlation between the two independent variables. How you detect that? You can use VIF after the regression, right? So make sure that the VIF score is not higher than 10. If it is higher than 10, you need to make decisions to drop one of the independent variable. But if you drop one of independent variable, it may be resulted in omitted variable bias. You need to trade up. But if you have like sample size, there is a small chance that you might have multicollinearity. But when we discuss multicollinearity, it's only for cross-sectional data. When it comes to time series or panel data, we use different term. Or probably we address it in different way. So far, what we discussed is only for cross-sectional data. All right? So now, let's continue to our today's lecture, which is the multiple regression analysis with qualitative information. By the way, class, I hope you guys review the lecture. All right. Otherwise, what I just recap is new to you. All right. So, before I move on, let me ask: are there any questions from last week that you want to clarify? Any questions you want to clarify with me? Folks, feel free to drop your question in the chat box. No questions? All right.
Teacher,
Yep.
may you clarify confidence interval once again?
Confidence interval? Confidence
Yes.
interval, if you remember how you calculate it, that is coefficient plus standard error multiplied critical value, right? And that confidence interval, say if you use critical value at 95%, this is the interval that parameter might exist. Remember this, David. You remember why we want to make an inference? We want to generalize. You want to say something about population, but you only have data from sample. All right. So what you found for your sample, coefficient from that sample, is only a group of sample. What if you use different data, the data from different sample? Will you get of the same coefficient? The case is no. What you want to know the most is whether this coefficient can represent to the populations. So one single value from coefficient cannot represent to the population. But remember, our null hypothesis is stating that the population parameter equals 0. So what we want to prove is that is this coefficient, if we use any other data, there will be any chance that it equals 0. So confidence interval with 95%, for instance, it tells us with 95% chance, will the population parameter equal 0? Or what is the lowest bound? What is the upper bound? So with confidence interval, there can be two. You can say there are two interpretations. First of all, if you use the other sample, right, the coefficient that you obtain might be between this lower to upper bound. And that interval also contains, it may contain, or probably the population parameter exists between this interval. Is that okay, David?
Yeah. Thank you, teacher.
So from your sample, you only obtain one coefficient, right? But you don't know whether this coefficients represent to the population. You don't know if you use data from population, you will obtain the same coefficient. You don't know at all. So how do you know what is the parameter of the population? You contract confidence interval so that you know that at least the population parameter should be between this confidence interval. All right. And also if you analyze different data or sample, 95% that the coefficient you obtain will be between this lower bound and upper bound. Right? Any other questions? All right. So let me move next to multiple regression analysis with qualitative information. So, guys, in the last 4 or 5 weeks, we only looking at both dependent and independent variable are numerical. Today, we are going to look at qualitative information. What variable contain qualitative information? The variables such as gender, such as race, such as industry, region, rating, grade. These are an example of qualitative information, right? So, for instance, gender, you have male and female. Race, you have black and white. Industry, you have agriculture, you have transport, you have services. Region, it can be rural or urban. Rating grade can be worse, bad, good, better, best, right? So these are examples of qualitative information. If you have qualitative information, how are you going to incorporate it in your model? No, you cannot integrate it as it is. For instance, if gender is male and female, how are you going to do that? You may say, oh, okay, I can convert code to 0, 1, that might be okay, or 1, 2, that's okay. But if you have 3 categories, how you have that? 1, 2, 3, how are you going to interpret? Remember from our previous lessons, if both dependent and independent variable are numerical or continuous, you interpret it like 1 unit increase in X, how much it affects Y, right? So if you have qualitative information, how you interpret like 1 unit increase in X, if your X is qualitative. You cannot say, if gender increased by 1 unit, no, it does not make sense. Why do we say gender increased by 1 unit? It will affect that much on Y. If race increased by 1 unit, if industry, if region, if grade increased by 1 unit, no, it is not correct, right? So when you have independent variable or dependent variable contain qualitative information, you need to do it in different way. A way to incorporate qualitative information, guys, is to use dummy variable. What is dummy variable? Dummy variable is a variable that contains 0, 1 variable. 0 versus 1. Only 2 categories. And 1 category is you give the value equal 1, you give its code equal 1, another value equal 0. For instance, gender. Assuming you only have 2 categories, you can say, okay, 1 equal female and 0 equal male. Or vice versa, you can have 1 equal male, 0 equal female. It's up to you. But guys, you need to convert it into dummy, because it is easier to interpret. You will see next, all right? So again, we start with variable with 2 categories. Variable with 2 categories, you may ask, like, what if variable contain more than 2 categories? We will discuss next. So we start with variable with only 2 categories, all right? If you have 2 categories, 1 category must be equal 1, another category must be equal 0, all right? So this is, we call it dummy variable. Specifically, it is 0, 1 variable. So we call it dummy variable. All right? And that qualitative information can be appear as dependent or independent. All right? So let's have a closer look. Here I have an example here, a vague equation. We basically want to include to assess effect on education on wage. But we learned that because of the nature of the job, gender may also influence wage, right? So we also have a variable here, which is, we call it female, all right? So here, this coefficient is the weight gain or loss if person is a woman rather than a man. When we say female here, the dummy variable mean that 1 if the person is a woman, 0 if a person is a man. All right. So by looking at this value, you compare women or women to men. Because in dummy variable, 0 is called base category or reference category. Following me? So here we have a female variable, and this coefficient is the weight gain or loss if person is a woman. What we say here is that if a person is a female, a woman, she earns this amount of coefficient higher or less than men. We will go to interpretation next, don't worry. But here we incorporate qualitative information with 2 categories, but convert it into dummy variable. Are you following me?
Teacher, one question.
Yep.
So if we want to observe on the male, so we need to put number. We need to put number 1 for the male and 0 for the woman.
Right. Correct. And in this case, you have to change from female to put it as male. Then the way you interpret is the coefficient is the coefficient for male comparing to female instead. Right?
Yes, sure. Thank you, sir.
All right. Next. Here.
Teacher.
Yep. Go ahead.
For core, we use a different denotation, right?
Oh, normally we use the same notation, but here just to distinguish, to help you identify it, find it easily. You can do the same. Don't worry. You can use delta 1 or delta 2 as well.
Thank you, teacher.
Right. Good observation, David. So this is here. You may see, oh, should we use different notation? No. But here just because today is just an introduction so that you can distinguish it. All right. When you look at the delta, this is numerical. If it is different, so it is not numerical independent variable. Just for an easy explanation. All right. Good. Next. To easily understand this, let me show you our earlier equations. But how should I do this? All right, like this. Let me zoom a little bit. Can you see the share screens clearly? Yes or no? Is that okay? Is that okay, guys?
Okay, teacher.
All right. So I want you to understand this graphical illustration. Here, if you look at our equation, we have weight equal delta 0 plus female plus education plus error term. Here, remember, this is female, meaning that female equal 1, male equal 0. So assuming that if this is male, what is the weight equation for male? If this is male. No, I'm sorry. What if we have an observation equal male? If the observation is male, then we will have female value here is 0, right? If that is the case, we will have weight equation, weight equal delta 0 plus delta 1 education. So that is why if you look at this graph here, the equation for this graph here is men weight equal delta 0 plus delta 1 education. Guys, you can download the lecture note from the folder. So here, why there is no female? Because we give male equals 0. Assuming this is male, then if 0 multiply coefficient, there is no this, right? No this part, components. So we delete this elements. So we only have weight equal delta 0 plus delta 1 education. How about female? If female equal 1, we will have here in full, right? So delta 0 plus the coefficient plus education. All right? You got it? This is when we replace the female by the value we have here. By the value we code here. All right? So the difference between the men weight equation and women weight equation is just this. The difference here is just delta 0 plus this. I forgot how do I pronounce this Greek number. Let's say delta 0. All right. So this is the difference. This is the coefficient for women. This is the slope. Sorry, the slope for women. This is the slope for men. How do we know that the men start with the higher salary than women? That is an empirical evidence. Normally, we found that men tend to earn more than women, right? So the coefficient here, if you look here, is delta 0. This is the what? The slope for men's equation. But the slope for women equation is delta 0 plus this delta 0. And normally, this delta 0 is negative. Why negative? Normally, we found female earn lower wage than male. That is why this is negative. All right. So if you have dummy variable 1, 0, it is easier to interpret. You can look it's like this, right? So the interpretation is the difference between male and female, right? Only if you use 1, 0. If you use, for instance, this qualitative information about gender 1, 2, then you will have different interpretation. You get what I mean? If you have here, this is 1, this is 2, then you have different interpretation because there is no 0. Then you have different, illustration on graph because you will have coefficient for male is different from what we have now because men is 0, right? So the difference between men weight equation and women weight equation is just this delta 0 or the slope for female variable. All right. So in order to find the difference, simply the weight equation for female minus, here the weight equation for female where it is equal 1 minus the weight equation for male, which is when female equal 0, right? Then you will found this delta 0 is the difference. So this is the difference of weight between men and women. Questions? All right. Let's have a look at the example. It might be easier. But before we move on, I just want to clarify this because some of you may ask, why don't we use, for instance, here, all right? In our earlier equation, guys, we only include, female. But is it possible if we include both like this? Weight equal delta 0 plus male plus female plus education? You can't. That we call dummy variable trait. If you include both male and female, the summation of these two will equal 0 for equal 1 for every variable. When it comes to stata application, I will demonstrate it for you. That if you include, the variable with 2 categories, and you include 2 variables for that, only 1 variable with 2 categories, 1 variable must be omitted because of perfect collinearity, right? So, for example, if you as a respondent and then you have 2 variables, okay? You have variable 1 for female and then you have another variable for male, all right? Then if you ask me what is your gender, male, okay? You have equal 1 and then female you have here is equal 0, right? You ask them what is your gender, male? 1, 0. If you include both variables here, these both reflect the same meaning, right? So one must be dropped, right? The model cannot be estimated with these two variables at the same time. We call it dummy variable trait. Why it cannot happen? Because of perfect collinearity, right? Because male and gender, everyone only have one gender, right? One category. If you include both, if I am male, equal 1, female must be equal 0. So this is perfectly predicted, perfectly correlated. It is linear. So 1 will be dropped. So what should you do? You can use either one of these two equations, all right? You can use female here. So if you use female, as earlier, the base category are men. What do we mean base category are men? Meaning that men equal 0. Or you can use different equation like saying as earlier, you can only include male. But if you include male in this case, you have women as the base category or reference category. So women here is equal 0. Right? Use only one of the two. In fact, you can use number 3 as well. By you delete the coefficient, but this is another issue. Normally, it's a little bit practically difficult to interpret for you guys. So you don't have to pay attention to this. Use either one of this, right? This one or this one. All right? Don't include both. If you include both, it's okay in the modern Stata application. It will automatically drop 1 for you. When it automatically drops, there is an issue of perfect collinearity, but not multi-collinearity, all right? Can you follow me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you for your reply. So let's move next. Wait a minute. Let me view. All right. Right. So now let's start with the example. All right. So the same equation as above. All right. Got it. If you look at this equation, what can you find here? Just look at the data. Remember, normally we only report standard error and coefficient. Why? Because assumption 1 to 4 produce unbiased coefficient. Assumption 1 to 5 produce unbiased standard error. That is why normally we report this too, right? So here, if you look at the female and the yes, female here, holding education and experience and 10-year fixed, because here we have 3 other independent variables. Women earn $1.81 less per hour than men. That's how you interpret the dummy variable. All right. No longer 1 unit increase in X, it increase in Y, but here you have to use the category that equal 1 compared to base category. So holding education and experience and 10-year fixed, or in other words, you say after controlling for education, experience, and 10 years, women earn $1.81 less per hour than men. Right? That is the proper interpretation. Following me, guys, about the interpretations. So if you use dummy variable, all right, always compare the category equal 1 with the base category, which is equal 0. And that is the difference, right? Less than or higher. But because here, the coefficient is negative, meaning that female earn less than male. Right?
Yeah, the negative sign are from calculation, right?
Yes, the negative sign is from calculation from Stata, for example. they have negative 1.81, meaning that female earn less than male. Our original equation always positive, right? It's always positive. But when you replace the coefficient by its original, it will change the sign. And this is N, this is R sphere. All right. What if someone say, based on this reasons, based on this result, can we say, does it mean that women are discriminated again? Can we say that? Non-economists could say that. Economists somehow could say that only if they properly control for other independent variables. Can you make causal interpretation with female on weight? It depends. How many variables have you control? Can you really say this is the women are discriminated again? Not necessary. Being female may be correlated with other productivity characteristics that have not been controlled for. It may also correlated with nature of job, right? It may be about job as well. Men tend to work more on, heavy job, for instance, labor demanded job. Women tend to not to work in the labor demanded job. All right. So the weight is also different. Okay. So you cannot say that based on this equation, women are discriminated again. So you need to control for other factors. From microeconomic theory, I believe that you study microeconomic theory about earning and discrimination. There are many theories about this. It's about ability, it's about education, it's about what else? Productivity, right? So there are many other factors that you should control for the nature of the job, characteristic of the job, all right? So you have to control for both job characteristic and individual characteristic. And after that, then you can say whether there is discrimination against women or not. So in other words, if you want to compare, if you want to say there is a discrimination against women, you need to compare two people with the same position, the same education, the same age, the same experience, the same ability, the same company. The only difference is only gender. That you can say. And normally that is why we try to control many other independent variables as much as possible. All right. Next. Here. What if we, excluding other three about independent variable? So what we found here is only the difference between gender when you do not take into account other characteristics. So look at here, when you do not hold other factor constant, or when you do not control for other factors, women earn $1.5 per hour less than men. See, originally it is only 1.8 if you control more variable, but if you do not control, the gap become wider and wider. So if you add more and more controlling variable, the gap becomes smaller, smaller, and smaller. Right? That's what you understand from why we use multiple linear regression rather than simple linear regression. Right? So that's why multiple linear regression is important to address the row condition only. All right? But here, at least you can look at the starting point. Right? So as I highlighted here, the weight difference between men and women is larger if no other things are controlled for. Right? For example, the difference due to education, experience, tenure that has not been controlled in this simple linear regression equations. So What I'm trying to say here, if you want to test hypothesis, if there is a discrimination against women, you need to do a lot of work, right? You need to do a lot of work on this. Economics, look at data and try to prove based on evidence, based on data. Any questions? Can you follow me? All right.
Follow, teacher.
Yep. Questions? All right. Next, then, here is another example, right? Here we look at the effect of training grant on hour of training, right? So here we have a dummy indicating whether the firm received training grant or not. And this is the hour training per employee. We also control for sale and number of employees. All right. That is an example of program evaluation. That's most of my job. I do this. Most of my research, my external work, I do this. Evaluate the program. All right. So we want to know if the program here did positive or negatively affects the hour training per employee. So grant, it is the dummy. 1 if the company receive grant. 0 if the company do not receive grant. In the future, guys, if you are interested, if your variable of independent, if your independent variable of interest is dependent variable, that's kind of variable training program. We call it program evaluation, or we call impact evaluation, right? Impact evaluation. So in this case, we have treatment group equal 1, with the company that receive grant receiver, versus what we call control group, or company that receive no grant, right? And if you look at this, the question is the effect of treatment on outcome is of interest is causal? Can we make causal interpretation? No, not really. That is not enough control. There are many other independent variables that may correlate with grant. You need to know what are the characteristics of firm that receive grant. You need to include those characteristics as an independent variable. Okay? So in this case, we cannot make causal interpretation on the effect of grant on our training per employee. Why? It might be that the firm receive grant would have on average train their worker more even in the absence of grant. All right? So nothing in this analysis tells whether we have estimate causal effect, unless you control all relevant dependent variable. All right? In our interpretation is still the same. If you look at here, you may say that, all right, the company who receive grant on average, what? Have our training per employee about 26.25. I'm sorry, the company that have received training grant have what? Have what? What is it? All right. If the company receive grant, that company experience our trainings per employee about 26.25 hour higher than firm that did not receive grant. All right, 26.25 hour training per employee higher than company that did not receive grant. All right, so very similar to earlier example. All right, here, what if we use the dependent variable with log? So if we use log, the interpretation is have to be changed to percent, right? Multiply 100. It's just very similar to when you have numerical variable. So in this case, for instance, all right, we have variable lot size, sphere, and so on, but our variable is colonial. Whether the house that constructed in colonial style earn the same price as the house that constructed in non-colonial style. So it's found that, all right, it is found that the house price increased by 5.4 percentage points. Or in other words, we found that the house, all right, that was constructed using the colonial style on average sell at 5.4% higher than house that using non-colonial style. All right, so our dummy here, we have colonial dummy indicating whether the house is of colonial style or zero is not. Right, so comparing the house with colonial style on average, the price is about 5.4% higher than the house with non-colonial style. Are you following me? Questions? Question number 1.
No question, teacher.
All right. Then let's have a look at what if you have a variable with multiple category. What should you do? What if you have a variable with multiple category? What should you do? Because earlier we only discussed a variable with 2 categories. We can generate it, convert it, or transform it into dummy 1 versus 0. Now you have a variable with multiple category. What should we do? For example, you have what? The education. You do not have education in year, but you ask, you know, for instance, 1 equal, you know, up to primary educations, 2 is up to high school, and 3 is from university degree. What should we do if we have 3 categories? How should we convert it into dummy? Still, we need to convert it into dummy to have an easy interpretation. How should we do that? All right. So when you have a variable with more than 2 categories, the same. You need to define membership in each category by dummy variable. All right. How do we do it? Leave out 1 category, which is become base category. In this case, in my example here, you can generate 2 dummy variables, a dummy variable for high school and a dummy variable for university, and leave out primary school. So here I will have 1 if a person have high school certificate. University is 0. If this is 0, this can be 1. But at some point, the other household do not have high school or that high university degree. They only have primary education. So if you have 3 categories, you should include 2 dummy variables into your model. You will understand more if you do not understand now when it comes to practice. But if you look at this example, in our example here, all right, we have actually a variable with 4 categories. We have married male here, all right, married male, married female, single female. Do you think what category is not included? It should be married male, married female, single male, and single female. But here in this variable, we only include 3 categories. We leave out single male. So the interpretation of these 3 dummy always compared to the best category that we leave out. Following me? Again, here we have a dummy with 4 variables. A variable with 4 categories. One is married male. 2, married female. 3, single male. 4, single female. Right. So in this case, if you look at our model, we only have married male, married female, and single female. What does that mean? It means that a variable with these 4 categories, they leave out single male. They leave out single male. This one, they leave out. So that when they run in the regressions, they will interpret these 3 dummy variables and compare it with single male. All right. For instance, wage. All right. You may find that married male earn 21% higher than single male. Again, married male earn 21% higher than single male, because here the wage here in log, right? Married male earn 21% higher than single male. How about married female? Married female earn about 19% less than single male. Single female earn about 11% less than single male. Always compare to the best category that we leave out. All right. Here, it is written, holding other things fixed. What factor that we could holding? Education, experience sphere, 10 year and 10 year sphere. Married women, married women, this one, earn 19.8% less than single men, the best category. All right. So a variable with 4 categories only includes 3 dummy in your regressions. So the rule is, it's very simple. The number of category minus 1. This is the dummy variable that you should include in your model. Question, guys?
Sure, less than or more than we determine by the minus or plus sign in front, right?
Correct.
Sure. So if I want to measure married male, I put married female, single female, and single male.
Pardon, please?
If I want to put married male as the best category, so for this I put married female, single female, and single male, right, sir?
Correct.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
All right. And it's always dummy 10. All right.
Excuse me, sir. If we use this dummy variable for multiple category, so we need to set 1 and 0 for those variable.
Correct.
So the 3 variable we need to set number 1, and for the one that we leave out of the equation, we need to set number 0.
This is a good question. This is a little bit confusing, but in here you only look at the variable that is specified. For instance, if you ask me what is my status, I said I am married male. So my married male will be equal 1, but married female will be equal 0. Single female will be equal 0 as mine. So you only look at the variable of your interest, and just only if it is it meets that status equal 1, otherwise equal 0. But when it comes to interpretation compared to base category, for instance, you saying here, married male equals 0, married female equals 0, single female equals 0, because you are single male. You got it?
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Right, thank you. Questions? All right, next then. So what we discussed in previous slide is when you have a qualitative information with multiple category. What if you have ordinal information? Remember what is ordinal information? It's also a category called variable, multiple category, but in order, right? In order, comparable. Such as rating here, we have 0 to 4, right? 0 is worse, then we have bad, then normal, then good, then best, right? So in this case, what should we do? So normally, if you run the simple regression by using just credit, which contains score 0 to 4, it is not correct, right? So instead here, you want to estimate, the city credit rating and municipal bond interest rate. But here, this credit rating is ordinal variable. It contains from 0 to 4, which is worst to best. All right, so it can be 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. Remember, guys, this 1 to 4 is not numerical information. It's not the quantitative information. So if you run regression like this one, right, the specific model is incorrect. All right, so here it is written as the specifications would probably be inappropriate. Why? Because credit rating only contains ordinal information. So a better way to incorporate this information is to define dummy as well. So since they are 0 to 4, so there are 5 categories, right? There are 5 categories. For instance, you have here is worse, this is bad, this is, for instance, no idea, this is good, this is best. In this case, when you have 4 categories, just treat it just like a variable with multiple categories. So when you have 5 categories here, how many dummies should you put in your regression model? In order to know this, just simply number of category minus 1. So you should include 4 dummies, right? So here, if you look at below equation, we change it into just from this CR, we have CR1, CR2, 3, and 4. Depends on you what is your CR1, what is your CR2, but you have to include 4 dummy variable. You cannot include 5. If you include all the 5, it is dummy variable trait. So here, dummy indicating whether the particular rating implied if CI equal 1, right? Or otherwise. All effects are measured in comparing to worst rating, right? Because here, so they start with bad comparing to worst, normal comparing to worst, good comparing to worst, and best comparing to worst. So we also have 4 dummy with the ordinal variable with 5 category. So it's just the same story as nominal variable with multiple category. Questions?
No, sir.
Teacher,
Okay. Yep.
Teacher, again, if you mean if we have 5 ordinal scale, we use with -1, right?
Yep.
Okay, thank you, teacher.
So the number of dummy to be included in the model should be number of category -1. So in this case, how many category we have? We have count it, not 0 to 4. You see it 4. No. 0 is also one category, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you have 5 category. How many dummy? Number of category -1. So you will get 4 dummy. That is why you look at the model below. It's just simply 4 dummy. Leave one out. That one that we leave out, it becomes base category.
Teacher, I have a question. How
Yep.
do we define base category to be excluded, teacher?
Good question. That is your own interest. What the base category you want to exclude? It's up to you. Like in this example, you want to exclude verse, or you want to exclude bad, or you want to include no idea, good or base. It's up to you. It's up to the researcher themselves.
But teacher, how about the value of each category? We have to define each. We have to like find all of them in order to compare.
No, here it's still 1, 0. This is dummy. All right. So the dummy here, for instance, for CR1, if you know I rate this city credit rating as verse, what does that mean? It means that this is R1 equal 1, that CR2 equals 0, CR3 equals 0, CR4 equals 0. In fact, CR0 also equals 0. You may rate it as, all right, base. If that is base, CR1 equals 0, CR2 equals 0, CR3 equals 0, CR4 equals 1. So every variable that you use in this model are all dummy. 1, 0, 1, 0. And I will teach you how to generate dummy variable based on the category in Stata, the quick case way. Either you use it manually or using the command. All right.
Teacher, how about the value like the previous slide that you show about the positive and negative?
No, this is the result from Stata. This is the result from Stata. This one as well. Here, this is the coefficient that you will generate. After you generate, you will see whether this is negative or positive. You got what I mean? So this is equation only. We do not produce the result yet. And this is I mentioned here is the result. I do not include the equation, right? If we write the equation, this should be delta 1, delta 2, delta 3, all in +4, like this. But after we run the equation, we may have some coefficient, then we can know whether it's negative, positive, and how much is the coefficient.
Yes, teacher, I got it. Thank you, teacher.
Yep. Any other questions? All right. If there is no question, let's move next. All right. So, guys, what we discussed earlier is when we have predictor independent variable contain qualitative information. All right. Either your independent variable is 2 category. If it is 2 category, simply generate to dummy variable. If it is multiple category or ordinal variable with multiple category, you need to generate dummy variable with equal number of category -1. Right? So in either case, that qualitative information are independent variable. What if you have a qualitative information as dependent variable? All right. If that is the case, guys, here we only discuss, the only talk here is when you have dummy variable or variable with 2 categories as dependent variable. We do not discuss with multiple category, all right? Only 2 category, and you have it in as your dependent variable. If you have more than 2 category, something that will cover or to be lecture in the future. Here we only limit your model when your dependent variable is contain qualitative information with 2 category. If that is the case, again convert it to dummy variable and you run your model as usual. But the name is changed from multiple linear regression to what we call linear probability model. Why? Because this time your dependent variable contain information 0 versus 1, right? 0 versus 1. This is probability. It's no longer multiple linear regression. We call it linear probability model. All right? So in linear probability model, your interest here, the interpretation of your interest here is no longer how much it increase and how much it affect Y. How much it increase if that independent variable is quantitative information affect the probability of Y, because this is 0, 1. All right? Dependent variable here is 0, 1. So in linear probability model, the coefficient describe the effect of explanatory variable on probability that it get closer to 1. Right? All right, following me? Let's have a look at our example first. Here, we have an independent variable 1 if in labor force, 0 at the Y. All right? You want to know, for instance, to estimate whether education has anything to do with women in labor force or not. All right, here, the example of labor force participation in married women. We want to know whether is there anything to do with married women in labor force determined by education or what the other variable. So here our dependent variable is dummy, 1 if in labor force, 0 is other Y. Then we have here is non-Y income. It means that the household income excluded from wife. All right. Education of that married women, working experience of the women's age, number of kids less than 6 years old, and number of kids age over 6 years old. So what you see here, you look here, you look at the coefficient, right? Look at coefficient. So what you see here is that if, for instance, the household income excluded income from Y increased by 1 unit, what happens? It reduces the probability of married women to work or to join labor force by around 0.003%, because this is the probability, right? Sorry, in percent, so we should say 0.34%. Right? Again, if the non-Y income increased by 1 unit, it will reduce the probability. Why I say reduce? Because this is negative, right? It will reduce the probability of married women to join labor force by 0.34%. That's true. Normally, if the household earn more income, they tend not to allow their wives to work. Either, not to experience the hardship, or either they want the wife to take care of the child. But normally, if they earn higher, they tend to encourage married women to stay home or not to work, not to stay home, I'm sorry, but not to work, right? How about education of married women? If education married women get higher, normally, just like many of you are here, you get higher education, you want to work, right? So here we found that if education increased by 1 unit, if that education is measured in schooling in year, if education increased by 1 year, it will increase the probability of married women to join labor force by around 3.8%. Right? However, for age, if age, all right, increased by 1 year, it decreased the probability to join labor force around 1.6%. If that household have the number of kids less than 1 year old, if the number of kids less than 1 year old increased by 1, it reduced the probability of joining labor force by around 26%. All right. Here you see the interpretation in written here. If the number of kids under 6 years old increased by 1, the probability that women work fall by 26.2%. So here, our interpretations is no longer the same. Questions? Question, guy?
No question, teacher.
Guy, if you observe here is that, all right, let me explain this again, Navin. All right. For non-wide income, for instance, if you look at non-wide income here, the income from household excluding white, excluded the married women. All right. So if you look at negative here, this is negative. But guy, as I told you before, you should start with p-value, but assuming here they are significant. All right. Here the sign is negative. If the household income, non-wide income increased by 1 unit, then if that unit is in thousand, you say if the net income increased by 1,000, or if it is not in thousand, if non-wide income increased by $1, the probability of married women to join labor force fall by 0.34%. Why? We just multiply by 100 to get percentage only. Or you might say the probability decreased by 0.034 if you don't say percent. Right? Education. If education, normally education measure in year, right? If education increased 1 year, positive is plus, right? The probability of joint labor force of married women will be increased by 0.38 or 3.8%. If you look at the kid, this is kid, number of kids less than 6 years, right? Number of kids in the family, in the household, less than 6 years. If the number of kids under 6 years increased by 1, the probability that women work fall by 26.2, or the probability will be reduced by 0.262 if you don't say percent. Is that okay, Navin? All right, guys, what if, for instance, I add another variable, say divorce, all right, minus 0.10 divorce, right? Divorce, and that divorce is dummy if it is divorce 0 under y. How do you interpret this? This is divorce. All right. How should you interpret this? I just want to add, if you have an explanatory variable contain qualitative information and dependent variable contain qualitative information. What should we do here? You have coefficient minus 0.10. Oh, sorry, not negative. Say positive. Because if you are divorced, you tend to work to support your family. If that is the case, if I have another variable divorce, 1 equals divorce 0 under y here, I would say, here we only say married women, but assuming, all right? If the women is divorced, all right, divorced women, or you would say the probability of the probability of divorce, the divorced women are more likely to join labor force comparing to non-divorced women. Or in other words, you would say, comparing to non-divorced women, there is about 10% that divorced women are more likely to join labor force than non-divorced women, about 10%. So what I'm going to say here is that the divorced women are more likely to join labor force than non-divorced women. And the difference here is that 10% higher than non-divorced women. All right? So the probability of joining labor force for divorced women is about 10% higher than non-divorced women. All right, it's more about highs or low, and again, it's about probability because of dependent variable. All right, so with this lecture, we only look at dependent variable with two categories and dummy. Just a note, only a note. In the future, you may learn that linear probability model is not the correct model for categorical dependent variable. But don't worry, just a note for you guys. Probably in the future, you learn that linear probability model is not a good model for dependent variable with qualitative information. All right? Question number 1. All right, so let me say a few words about disadvantages and advantages of linear probability model. But you see the term linear probability model because the dependent variable is dummy variable, all right? The disadvantages is that the predicted probability may be larger or smaller than 0. Our dependent variable is actually 0, 1. But if you use the equation to predict it, it may be out of the range. That is the disadvantages of linear probability model. That is, I said that in the future you may learn it is not the correct model. Right? Also, if you use linear probability model, it will produce heteroscedastic variant. All right? It may produce heteroscedastic variant. If that is the case, you need to address the issue of heteroscedasticity, meaning that assumption number 5 is violated with linear probability model. We will discuss this next week. But advantages is that if you use linear probability model, it's easy to estimate and interpretations. Even though the prediction somehow is less than or higher than 1 or less than 0, but normally it is reasonably good practice. You don't have to worry about this. All right. So that is all about the lecture on multiple regression with qualitative information. So here we discuss 3 cases. The case with, first of all, you have an explanative variable with 2 categories. If that is the case, you use just dummy. The case that you have either multiple category or ordinal variable, in that case, you need to use the number of dummy variable by number of category minus 1. If you have 4 category, you use 3 dummy. If you have 5 category, you use 4 dummy. And lastly, we discuss linear probability model when your dependent variable contains qualitative information with 2 categories. All right. So we no longer call it multiple linear regression. We call it linear probability model. Any question before break? After that, I will move to this data applications so that you guys may have a better understanding. Well,
Teacher,
questions?
I have a question, teacher. So when we have two categories, we use a dummy model, right, teacher? So
When your dependent variable contain two categories, you convert it into the dummy and use what we call linear probability model.
and the same thing goes to multiple. When we have a multiple category, when the dependent variable have the multiple category, we still choose the dummy model, but it's just plus minus one dummy, right?
No. When you have dependent variable contain multiple category, we do not discuss it yet. Here we only discuss linear probability model when you have dependent variable contain two category and you convert it to dummy. But if you have a dependent variable with more than two category, we do not study yet. Do we answer your questions?
Oh, so I thought that the previous like here this example is the label false participant, like I see a lot of independent variables here. So I thought it was the multiple category.
No, it's only two category. So what we discussed with linear probability model, it's only contain two category. If more than three category, that is not correct. We cannot do it the same way as when qualitative information as an independent variable, right? If that is an independent variable, that's okay. But if that, the qualitative information contain multiple category, you cannot run this linear probability model. Then you may ask, what model should I use? In the future, you will learn it. We have different model. Right?
Yes, yeah, I got it now.
Right. I can give you guys just a short answer. In the future, you may do a quick search. You can use, it depends on the nature of variable. You can use multinomial logistic regressions. If it is ordinal, you can use what we call all the logistic regression. Right there, a lot to study. Don't worry. Good. Any other questions? All right. Before we close, let me repeat this again. We so far only look at three cases. The first case, when independent variable contain two categories, you use dummy variable. The second case, when independent variable, still independent variable, contain more than two categories, or it is ordinal variable. If that is the case, you need to create multiple dummy variable. And the number of dummy variable to be included in the model is number of category minus 1. If you have 4 category, use only 3 dummy variable in the model. If you have 5 category, use 4 dummy variable in the model. The last case, when you have dependent variable contain qualitative information with only 2 category, and you convert it into dummy 1 versus 0, that if that is the case, we call it linear probability model. And how you interpret it, no longer how much x affects change how much y, but if x increased by 1 unit, how much it affects the probability of that dependent variable. All right, let's stop here. Let's have a 30-minute break. Now it is only 6:54. 30-minute break as usual. So please return back to our room at 7:25. I see you after break, everyone, with the hand-on exercise. You want to ask a question? Shumei?
No, teacher, I accidentally touched the mute.
All right. Okay. Hello, guys. Are you back?
Yes, teacher. Yes.
All right. Hello, everyone. Hopefully, you are here. So before we move on, everyone, you can open this file. I uploaded before the class the data hands-on exercise for week 11, and also please open your data file, your data program. Let me show the full screen. All right. Right. Please open this data program. We are going to use the data from the last application. All right, use the same data if we elementary academic performance 2. All right. You ready? Can I start now?
Excuse me, sir. Where is the data?
Data here, if you can load it from the web, you can do it with me, or if you cannot, you can download it from the data folder. I uploaded in the last week. You can see my share screen. It is in general, file, data, this data that I uploaded in November 23. We are going to use that the same data set.
Oh, yeah, sure. Thank you, sir.
All right, let's start then. Guys, for this hand-on exercise, first, I am going to tell you how to, mainly to transform the variable into the dummy, or if time allows, we will move to linear probability model. But if not, we will do it next week. All right. So allow me to read this document. You have it in your hands. You can download it. All right. So this chapter will use element academic performance 2 data that you have seen in the prior chapter. All right. We use that in multiple linear regression. We will focus on 4 variables in these applications: academic performance 2000, SAM, columns, year round, and meal cake. All right, which take meal and break it into 3 categories. Meal here, you will see later, meal here is the categorical variable that we will generate into 3 dummy. All right, this meal variable will break up into 3 categories. Let's have a quick look at this variable first. All right, so you can copy this link. You can copy this link and pass it in your data and run. All right, so if I get back to my data, I run the link. I run the link. Now loading the data. The data is already available in my variable window. Right? Make sure everyone's load the data into your data now before we move on. Ready, everyone? Have you loaded the data into the data program? Any problems? The same data set from last time. Either you load from the web or you open it from your directory. The data should be available in your directory by now, right? Okay, I assume that there is no problem with loading your data. Now what we are going to do is to get to know this 4 variable first. All right. So we run describe. To run describe this variable, you can just copy and paste, right? Describe AP00 time column year round and meal kit. All right. I run it and I see the result here. Right. If you look at this variable, you see AP 2000 parent Sam college, parental college, year-round school, percent free meal in 3 categories. All right. So let me get back to the data. So the variable AP00 is measure of performance of the school. It is an academic performance of the school, right? AP00. Variable Sam collect is the continuous variable that measure the percentage of parents in school who have attended college. So the proportions of parents who attended college. All right, the child parent who attended college. This is the continuous variable. And variable here, this is year-round, is the categorical variable. It is code 0 if school is not year-round, and 1 if school is year-round. Right? Since there is no break. Variable meal is the percentage of students who have received state sponsor free meal and can be used as indicator of poverty. This was breaking down to 3 categories to make equally sized group, creating meal cat. So meaning that this meal cat is the categorical variable. All right. It originally transformed from meal. So in order to understand more about the data, guys, you can just write summarize like I did here, right? Summarize all the 4 variables. You should obtain the summary statistics. To push aside a little bit so that you can see it clearer. All right. So here, if you look at my screen, the FP academic performance in year 2000, 400 observation, minimum is from this to that. Time year collect, this is the continuous variable of parental collect. From 0 to 67, this is in percent. Year round, 0 versus 1. Meal cat, this is categorical variable, 1 versus 3. Right, so descriptions does not tell you much. So in order to understand more about meal cat variable, you should type tab or tabulations or tabulate meal cat. Then you see this. All right. So meaning that the first category is the school that have about less than 46 students who receive free meal from state. And second category is school receive about 47 to 80 students receive free meal from state. Third category, if school has about 31 to 100% of students receive free meal from state. So it means that The school who are in the higher category, they are the school with higher poor student, right? This is the school with higher poor students, with higher rate of a poor student, because majority of students receive free meal from state. You following me? So far I am here. So I enlarge those screens so that you can have a look. All right. So far we just get to know the data and variable. If the variable is continuous, using summarize. If the data is categorical variable, using tab. Question everyone? Questions? Just get to know the data. I believe there is no question because I did not got any reply. All right. So now let's start with regression with a dummy variable. All right. Regression analysis with a dummy variable. So the simplest example of categorical predictor in the regression analysis is a 0-1 variable, or called dummy variable, right? Or call a dummy variable. So let's use variable year round as an example of a dummy variable, because you can see that year round is a dummy variable. We can include a dummy variable as predictor in regression analysis as shown below. So simply run this regress FP year round. Just run a simple linear regression. All right. Now I run a simple linear regression. Regress FP year round. Run it. And I got the result. Have you obtained the result? Same as mine. How is it now, guys? Any problem? All right. Hopefully everyone obtained the result. Guys, remember, how should you interpret this result? Year round, what is the best category if school is not year round? So how do you interpret this? As usual, yep, go ahead, David. David, you want to say anything? David? Guys, how should you interpret this result? Ok, can you say about this result? Okay. I didn't do this up. Right? How could you interpret this result? This. All right. So let me get back to the handout. So here we obtain this result right now. So this may seem odd at first, but this is the legitimate result analysis. But what does this mean? All right. We can go back and write the equations at this model and we imply like this, right? So FP00 equal constant plus coefficients year round, this delta year round multiply year round, right? Where the constant is an intercept, and we use B year round to represent the coefficient for year round. So we have this equation. You will obtain this, right? FP, this is the constant you get from here, right? And this is the coefficient minus here, right? Multiply year round. So if school is not a year round, if it is not a year round school, the regression equations should be simply like this. P00 constant plus 0, right? Year round. So you will obtain that the constant is an intercept for school which is not year round. You remember to the graphical illustration I taught you earlier between male and female. So if you use 1, 0, you see the interpretation is easy. When you replace the value of non-year round equal 0, constant is for school which is not year round. If school is a year round, the regression equation would be simply 1 multiply beta coefficient. Then you will get this constant plus 1 multiply coefficient. Then you will get that, all right? Here is the slope for the slope or the value for school which is year round. So you see that school which is year round have a lower academic performance than school which is not year round. All right. So here you can interpret that school which is year round, right, have lower academic performance than school which is not year round. And the difference is about 160 score, meaning that year round school on average obtain 160 score lower than non-year round school, right? Following me? You following the interpretations?
Yes, sir.
All right. Next, guys. Next, we are going to illustrate what if you don't use 1, 0? What if you use 1, 2, for instance? What if you use 1, 2 instead of 1, 0? We suggest you guys to use 0, 1 as a dummy or 1, 0. But what if you say, sure, or like, can I use 1, 2 variable? You can, but the interpretation is different. All right. So now let's change from 0, 1 to 1, 2. A categorical predictor variable does not have to be coded 0, 1 to be used in the regression model. It is easier to understand and interpret the result from a model with dummy variable. But the result from variable coded 1, 2 yield essentially the same result. All right. So now let's make a copy of the variable year round called year round 2 that code as 1 2 instead of 1 0. How do we code this? Generate, all right, a new command generate year round 2 equal year round, and then you recode year round 2 equal 0 if it originally equal it equal the 0 become 1 and 1 become 2. All right, I get back to my data. I get into my data here, as you can see in my screen. All right, so I generate a year round variable 2 equal year round, but now I recode year round 2 from 0 to 1 and from 1 to 2. We run it. All right, if you take a look at year round, it's still 1 0, but if you take a look at year round 2, it becomes 1 2. It's no longer the same. Are you following me on how to recode from 0 1 to 1 2? 0 become 1, 1 become 2. Right? And in the regressions, if you are done, you run the regression with year round 2 when you have categorical as 1 2. You should obtain this regression. You should obtain this result. Have you obtained the same result as mine? Is everything okay, everyone? Guys, is it okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right. So now let's look at the result. You may see that the coefficient is the same, guy. The coefficient is the same. All right. If I move up, the coefficient is the same. But if you look at the constants, it's no longer the same. All right. The constant is no longer the same. When you use 0 1, the constant is 684. But now the constant is 845. So in order to know the difference, you need to replace the value again. All right. So here, note the coefficient of year round is the same as year round 2. So you can see that if you code year round as 0 1 or 1 2, the regression coefficient work out to be the same. However, the intercept constant, all right, is a bit less intuitive. You cannot interpret it. When we use year round, the intercept has was the mean of non-year round, right? When we use 0 1, the intercept is just the mean of non-year round school. But when you use year round 2, the intercept is the mean of non-year round minus this year round 2. Example, you have to use intercept minus 160, right? So the intercept or the mean of the non-year round school is not the same as before. It's still the same. The way you calculate it is not the same as before. All right. So note that you can use 0, 1 or 1, 2 coding as the result for coefficient with, outcomes for the coefficients come out the same, but the interpretations of constants in the regression equations is different, right? So I highlight in red here. It often easier to interpret estimate for 0, 1 coding, right? All right. So in here, what we demonstrate here is that the coefficient is the same, but the constant is no longer the same, and you want to have to look at the mean score. It is another interpretation. All right. But in conclusion, in summary, this result indicate that academic performance score are significantly different for school depend on the type of school. Year-round school versus non-year-round school. Non-year-round school have significantly higher academic performance or score than year-round school. Based on the regression result, non-year-round school have score that are 160 points higher than year-round school, right? So guys, it is just to demonstrate that using 0, 1 is much easier. Questions? Any problem with data? Any question you want to clarify?
No, sir.
All right. Thank you. All right, guys. Now let's move next to the qualitative information and in predictor, which you have multiple category. Now assuming in this example you have 1, 2, 3 variable. All right, 3 category. We start with manually creating dummy variable. Manually first. All right. Say that we would like to examine the relationship between amount of poverty, and that amount of poverty is represented by meerkat and FP score. We don't have measure of poverty, but we can use meerkat as a proxy of measure of poverty. Below, we repeat the code book for meerkat, showing the value of 3 categories. All right, so you can type code book and meerkat to understand more. For instance, right? So I type meerkat, a code book meerkat, then I can see the result like this. All right, category 1 is 0 to 46 student in the school receive free meal. Category 2 from 47 to 80 students, 80% of students receive free meal. Category 3, 81 to 100% of students receive free meal. So the school which in the higher category, meaning that the school with a higher incidence of poverty. So based on this, we should assume that school with higher category should have a lower academic performance. Let's see. Right? Can I continue? Now we are running code book meerkat to understand it. All right. So as we talked during the lecture, you might be tempted to try to include meerkat as a regression like this. You treat it not as a qualitative information, but you run regress, FP00 and meerkat. All right. So let's say I run this. Regress, FP00 and meerkat, and then I obtain this result. Right? Have you obtained the result? The question is, if you obtain this result, how to interpret it? If meerkat increased by 1 unit, how much it affect Y? No, because meerkat here is the categorical information. There are 3 categories. 1, 0 to 47, 2, 47 to 80%, 3, 30% to 800%. This is not a quantitative information. It is the qualitative information. We cannot interpret the result like this. This model is not appropriate. The result of this regression that we are doing here is not appropriate. Right? So what should we do? Right, let me get back to the document first. All right, by looking at this linear effect of meerkat with FP00, right? But the meerkat is not an interval variable. It's not a numerical variable. Instead, you want to code the variable so that all the information concerning the 3 level is accounted for. You can't dummy code meerkat like this. How to do the dummy variable? All right, calculate meerkat, comma, generate meerkat. Right, this is the way you can generate the dummy. All right, so let's try. All right, calculate meerkat, comma, generate meerkat. Run. After you run, guys, the command, you should see new 3 variables here. Meerkat 1, meerkat 2, meerkat 3. Can you find it in your data, in your variable window? Now we have 3 meerkat guys. Meerkat 1 is the dummy variable for first category. Meerkat 2 is the dummy variable for second category. Meerkat 3 is the dummy variable for third category. You can look at the label here. If the school is between 0 to 46, 47 to 80, 81 to 100. Have you obtained the 3 new dummy variable?
Yes, sir.
Right, thank you. Anyone have any problem with generating dummy variable? Here 3 categories. Using this command, you have 3 dummy variable, but integration, you should use only 2 dummy variable. You will see next. First of all, let me ask, does anyone experience any problem? And then move on. I assume no. All right, so let's move next then. So here, now we have created meerkat 1. That is 1 if meerkat is 1, 0 otherwise, meaning that this meerkat 1 represents 1 if school has students around between 0 to 46, that is still female, right? Likewise, meerkat 2 is 1 if meerkat is 2, meaning school or the student about 47 to 80 students is still female from state, 0 otherwise, and likewise 3 was created, right? And if you want to see more about the variable, how it look like, you can see this by below. List meerkat, meerkat 1, meerkat 2, meerkat 3. You list it from the first 10 respondents. No label, but meaning that you want it to show in value. All right, you want to have a look at this. Let's follow this. Let me share this. All right, So you copy this and then wait a minute. Right, copy this. Copy this, all right, and run it. All right. No label, meaning that they are should show in value. Run. We have a look at the data. From the first 10 observation, all right? Have you this guy? If you look at Meerkat original variable, they are the first 10 respondent is 2, 3, 3, 1, 1, right? And now we only created 3 dummy variable with the command that I showed you earlier, because the school here is fall into the second category. The dummy for Meerkat 1 equals 0, Meerkat 2 equals 1, Meerkat 3 equals 0. See? It automatically generates a dummy for you. For second school, which is classified as third category, Meerkat 1 and 2 is 0, Meerkat 3 is 1. So school number 3, number 4, number 5 are the same. For school number 6 to number 10, they all are classified in first category. So Meerkat 1 is 1, Meerkat 2 and 3 are 0. Right? So here you have 3 categories, you see? This is how you generate dummy manually. Is that okay? Any question with this dummy, guys? You may not understand it during the lecture. Hopefully you see the picture and understand it here. Any questions with generating dummy?
No, sir.
All right. All right. So next, all right, we now use 2 of this dummy in the regression analysis. Now, assuming that I want to run a regression with all dummy guys. All right, assuming I want to run a regression with all dummy. Right? So I run regress Meerkat 1, Meerkat 2 to Meerkat 3. See what happened. Can you follow me? I run regress FP00, Meerkat 1, Meerkat 2, and Meerkat 3. And I click regress. And look at the result. It's too small. So let me enlarge it a little bit. To run it again. You see what happens? Because the variable contains 3 categories, if I include 3 dummy variables, we are fall into what we call dummy variable trap. Right? Dummy variable trap, because each school only fall into 1 category. If I include all the 3 variables, they are linear correlated. You get what I mean? So if you run all the 3 variables, 1 variable will be automatically dropped. Okay, will automatically drop. In this case, it dropped Meerkat number 2. Right? It dropped Meerkat number 2. Questions? So, as I told you during the lecture, if you have a variable with 3 categories, only use 2 dummy variables. Only use 2 dummy variables. Questions?
No question, Tom.
Rồi, When you stay silent, I don't know what's going on because I cannot see your face. All right. So next. Now, assuming that we want to run a regression with two dummy 2 and dummy 3, and we leave out dummy 1. All right. Leave out dummy 1. So we run these regressions. Leave out dummy 1, meaning that the meerkat 1 will become your best category. You click runs, then you will obtain this regression result. All right. Guys, the question was asked during the lecture. How do we know which one to leave out? That depends on your own choice. All right, your own preference. Which one you want to leave out? You want to leave meerkat 1, meerkat 2, or meerkat 3? It's up to you. All right. Hopefully, you guys obtain the result now. Next, let's interpret the result. All right. So we can test the overall difference among the 3 groups by using test command. No, I will not show you here. All right. But here, what I want to tell you next here is that you compare this result, the coefficient with your best category. Remember, category 1 is the best among the 3 categories, right? Remember that meerkat 3, meerkat 1 is 0 to 46, meerkat 2, 46 to 80, meerkat 3, 80 to 100. So that is why if you compare meerkat 2 with meerkat 1, it is lower, right? So school with classified a category, category 2 on average has academic performance about 166, lower than school category 1. School in category 3, it's about 300 lower than category 1. See, because category 1 is the best, right? But what if you say, like, can I change my category, your best category? Yes. If you change your best category to, for instance, I include category 1 and 3, and I leave out category 2, what happened? All right. I run this, the new one, with meerkat 1 and meerkat 3. Now, guys, we obtain different result. You following me? I include meerkat 1 and meerkat 3. We obtain different result now. Why? Because our best category is different. Right? If you compare meerkat 1 school, which is classified at category 1, it performed better than meerkat 2. Meerkat 1 has about 166 higher than meerkat 1. But if you compare meerkat 3 with meerkat 2, meerkat 3 has lower academic performance than meerkat 2. And on average, it's about 135. If you pay attention to this coefficient, guys, meerkat 1 compared to meerkat 2, 176 higher than meerkat 2. If I get back to our original equation here, meerkat 2 compared to meerkat 1, negative 166. You see? Compare meerkat 2 to meerkat 1 is negative 166. But compare meerkat 2 to meerkat 1 to meerkat 2, it is positive 166. So it will adjust based on your best category. Following me? Now, what if I change my best category to meerkat 3? Right? I use meerkat 1 and meerkat 2. If that is the case, you see, the coefficient we obtain now are all positive. Why? Because we compare school category 1 and school category 2 to school category 3. And school category 3 is worse off comparing to school category 1 and 2. That is why coefficient for meerkat 1 is positive, which is 301 higher than category 3. And school in category 2, which is 135 higher than school in category 3. All right. So your best category determines the coefficient of the dummy that you use in the model. Right? Question, guys. Hopefully, this demonstration answer to the questions. What is the best category should we choose? Again, the answer based on your preference, your reference, what you want to compare the result to. And I demonstrate 3 different cases with 3 different categories. Remember, with 3 categories, include only 2 dummy. Question, please. Am I a little bit fast?
No question, teacher.
All right, thank you. Someone else have questions? You should be able to learn how to generate dummy and decide what best category you want to live up. And remember to include only number of category minus 1 in your model. If you include all the 3 categories as I showed earlier, theta will automatically drop 1 variable out. Why? Because of perfect collinearity. Because of dummy variable trap. Does anyone have any questions you want to clarify? Or I am too fast? I go a little bit fast because you guys already familiar with multiple linear regressions. Right? It take a minute or 2 minutes to have a look. And if you have questions, to ask. Don't be silent. That okay, guys? Okay. So I hope everyone follow me. So the case that we discussed earlier is when you want to use manual command instead of you want to create dummy first, and then you decide yourself which one to live up. Right? Remember, guys, if you use a manual technique, the choice of leaving out a best category is yours. Next, let's demonstrate how to use the command. All right. So we are going to use XI command to run regressions with dummy. All right. So here, in order to use XI command, guys, we just run XI regress. Sorry. How do I call this? To stop. All right. XI to stop regress FP I meerkat. Right, you can try this. Let me run here. Right, I run it here. XI to dot regress FP and meerkat. When you click run, guys, with this type of XI command, Stata will decide a best category for you. And normally it omit first category. It omit first category. Have you obtained the result the same as mine like this? Right? A note, guy. After you run xi regress this up300 I meerkat, the dummy variable also created for you here. You look at my window, right? I have here is underscore I meerkat 2 underscore I meerkat 3. Represent dummy variable for category 2 and dummy variable for category 3, right? But again, these regressions will automatically drop the first category out from your analysis. You have no choice to decide the best category, right? You don't have choice to decide the best category. So it is the case to use manual techniques so that you can make your own decision on which best category you want to compare to. Questions? Right? Either manual or using the command, it's up to you. Any questions?
No,
Right?
from me, like.
Okay. Everyone is silent. Let's move on. All right. So let here, when we use xi and we include the term I.meerkat in the model, Stata create the variable underscore I meerkat 2 and I meerkat 3 that are dummy variable just like meerkat 2 and meerkat 3 that we created before. All right. There really is no difference between meerkat 2 and underscore meerkat 2 here. The variables are the same. If you want to check, guys, you can run a tab. Let me run a tab between this meerkat, sorry, not this one. This meerkat 2 and meerkat 2 here. All right. I run a tab. I will tell you the result. Run. You see what is that say? If meerkat say it is 0, if meerkat 2 say it is 0, underscore meerkat underscore 2 also say it is 0. So the result is consistent. Okay. Either you use manual technique or xi command. The results are the same. So what if we wanted a different group to be a reference category group or base category group? If we create a dummy variable we tabulate generate earlier, then you can easily choose which variable will be omitted group. For example, let's omit group 3 that I discussed earlier. All right. So if you do it manual, if you use manual technique, the choice is yours. But if you use xi command, the choice is Stata. Right? Right? Questions? I stop here. I talked a lot. It is your turn. Question, please. Next week, we will continue with a dependent variable as a dummy variable. Can you follow me, guys? Any questions about today's lectures? All right. That is all for today's lecture. We still have about 7 minutes to go. Does anyone have any questions that you want to ask me either about the lecture or about your group research paper or group assignments? Does anyone want to ask any questions? Does anyone want to take any suggestion from me? By the way, guys, everyone, the deadline for your group assignments is 31st January. All right. I will publish an announcement on the deadline of your group assignment. For your quick note now is 31st January. Question everyone?
Not for me, teacher.
All right. If there is no questions, let's end our lecture a little bit early today. It's about 6 or 7 minutes early. If there is no question, guys, stay safe. I'll see you next week. Merry Christmas. Take care.
Merry Christmas, teacher.
Merry Christmas, teacher.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Merry Christmas, teacher. Goodbye.
All right.